You're listening to the LDS Sexologist, a podcast devoted to tackling the taboo and finding the connection between spirituality and sexuality. To submit your anonymous questions, click the link in my Instagram bio. Hello everyone and welcome back to the LDS Sexologist. Today I'm going to be tackling more of your anonymous questions. So I left you all off on a little bit of a teaser before in my last question and answer episode, and I just felt like that was mean. That was not nice of me to do. So instead of making you wait an entire week, and also in an attempt to catch up on all of the anonymous questions that I have, I decided to make an extra episode for this week. So starting off with the top question that we have that we left off on is, can Mormons use sex toys before marriage? Now, I'm going to combine this question with some other similar ones, and I'm going to attempt to answer them all at once. Okay, so here are some other similar questions that I have that are in this same category. What are your thoughts about masturbation as an unmarried LDS member? Is masturbation against church policy? Are vibrators and sex toys all right? What does it mean if I feel no sexual attraction or desire for sex with another human being, but I still enjoy self-pleasure? I have pain during penetration and have been told to masturbate on my own. I don't know if we can do that. Is that something that would actually help, or would I be breaking the commandments? And then I have about over 12 more that are just variations of the same, like, so what's the policy on masturbation? What do you think of masturbation? Everyone wants to know what my thoughts are on masturbation. And when I started really thinking about this was a couple years ago, where I was like, okay, I need to come up with my thoughts on this particular subject matter, because I get asked it so often, and I had my own thoughts about it, but I was like, okay, it's one thing to think about something that makes sense in your own head, and it's also, the work that you go through in order to, like, come to a conclusion that, like, feels good, and then it's another thing to explain that to someone else who's not you. You know what I mean? And I had my own personal thoughts and feelings on it, but I thought, I really want it to be more than just me, myself, and I, and my opinion. Like, I would like this to be a little bit more science-based, a little bit more spiritual as well. So I studied for a year in my free time the history of masturbation and Christianity. The entire history of the narrative that we have around masturbation, the anxiety that particular topic produces. Me even saying the word may make you feel uncomfortable. I wanted to know why and what it was about this particular topic that is the topic that every single person asks me about, whether they're single, whether they're married, whether they have children. It does not matter. This is the number one question. Now, I do have an entire lesson, it's still coming together, about what I have learned about masturbation. I've read multiple books on it, I have read histories on it, I've read other church works and thoughts about it. I mean, I have really done a lot of research on this particular topic, and this is not the episode in which I, deep dive into that, because I have scriptures and I have quotes and I have everything, and that is going to be one of my presentations. I do think I'm going to make it free and available to everyone, because it is such an asked topic for me, so I do think I'm just going to make that available. It is still coming, it's in the works. I know I've been teasing it for quite a while if you listen to my other podcast. But, it's hard to put an entire year's worth of research into something that's easily understandable and digestible, and talking about it and really getting enough context but not overdoing it. And also, can we just talk really quick? The color palette for that particular presentation, it took me so long to figure out what I wanted, the images and background to be, because when you're tackling the most taboo topic and subject that there is in sexuality, which in my opinion it is masturbation, it's it's difficult to really nail down what that presentation's going to look like. And I thought it wasn't going to be that tricky. Turns out it was. I seriously spent like, oh gosh, probably 5 hours looking through different options and trying to see like what formatting, what looked good. I was like, if it's too flowery, then it doesn't fit the vibe. If it's like too like strict in its colors and its imagery and whatever, then like I think I'm sending a different message. I want it to be like gender neutral. It was a struggle, let me tell you. But hey, we got there in the end. I'm actually quite pleased with the color format, and yeah, it's not like I'm doing a lot of images of people or anything like that. The images that I have an entire section on the patented designs that came out in the early 1700s for chastity belts to prevent masturbation for men. And that is just so important when we look at history and we understand how the body actually works and like the harm that these caused, because you can get erections from zero stimuli. It can be reactive. It's a place in your spine that can cause oh my goodness, I'm blanking right now on the word. It's involuntary. It's like when you hit your elbow or you hit your knee. Reflex. That's the word. A reflexive erection. There's a little part in men's spinal cord where if they stand up or if they sit down or if they do something and it like twinges that, then just as a reflex, in the same way that when you hit your knee in a certain spot it'll spring forward, the same thing happens. And so this is really important when it comes to the context of like, it doesn't automatically mean that there was like stimuli in order to get an erection. And then back in the day, like, to be wearing these devices that were made out of metal that restricted any sort of erection could be quite painful and quite torturous, and how it increased male volatility and then violence as well. It's all interrelated. It's very, very important. So that entire context and lesson is coming very, very soon. So just please hold on for that. But today I am going to attempt to answer these particular questions, but just know there's a lot more context to this that will help you, especially if what I have to say doesn't really satisfy your actual question. Then hopefully you can go and watch a YouTube video that's like gonna be, I'm trying to make it only 2 hours, like 2 parts, 1 hour each, but there's just so much, and it's so fascinating. But if you are here for me to tell you whether something is right or something is wrong, put in quotes, I'm so sorry, you're in the wrong place. That's not what I'm here for. I am here to educate you on what these things actually are. So masturbation or self-stimulation in general, if we're talking scientifically, this is something that is very, very developmentally normal and in fact encouraged, because when you are actually in utero, you will often find cute little babies that are about to be born. They will be masturbating. They'll be touching their genitals as a way to self-comfort. Now, of course, when children and when babies do this, even up until like certain ages, they are not doing it in a sexual capacity. These are parts of our bodies that really help calm our nervous system, and it is very pleasurable, and it can be very self-soothing. So this is a normal activity for especially like younger children to be doing. Where the anxiety comes is the sexuality that we have associated with this behavior as adults, and then we immediately put that on children, and then that can be very concerning. Right? Like this behavior where you're going, whoa, 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 that's like way too sexual. Well, we need to understand developmentally where things start to become associated with sexuality and where they are just a normal behavior. and how we can work with that. Now, I do have an episode in my LDS parenting series specifically about masturbation with children, so go listen to that, because these questions today are directed towards adults. So my answers are going to be directed towards adults, but please know that there is a difference, because when I'm talking to adults, we are taking it from a sexual context, right? You're not just doing it for self-soothing. I mean, you can still, but typically there's more association there, and there's better development there, and cognitive ability, and there's more content and context involved. Whereas for children, it is not that way, and we need to make sure that we separate those and understand that those are different. A child masturbating versus a teenage masturbating versus an adult masturbating. Although it may be a similar behavior, the intention behind it, the understanding of it, that's different at different phases. Okay? So that's first off. I feel like we have a lot of things we need to tidy up first, and then we can actually sit in the room and talk about it. So that's first. Secondly, the question about, can Mormons do this? Is this okay? I feel like a lot of times those questions are coming from a morality standpoint, is this a sin? Is essentially what I'm being asked, or what I feel that I'm being asked. So let's give you a little bit of context, because I am here to educate you. I'm not here to say yep, it's a sin, or no, it's not a sin. I'm here to help you understand so that you, the context of scripture and church policy and the behavior itself, so that you can come to a conclusion on your own, okay? Because you need to be able to think critically about things. You need to be able to self-author. You need to be able to seek revelation about what your life is going to be filled with, the types of behaviors you're okay with, the types of things that are going to bring you pleasure, and the types of times that you need to refrain from certain behaviors in all contexts, okay? In every single context. The times in which it's totally okay to eat 4 slices of cake and, do all sorts, or versus times where it's better to maybe not eat it, and to exercise and to treat your body well. There is context to everything, right? To just say that sugar is bad, sugar is evil, well, that's fundamentally untrue. Okay, and if you have that mindset about sugar, then you are going to be living in a lot of guilt and a lot of fear constantly around this topic, constantly around sugared items. Any sort of dessert is going to bring you anxiety because you don't know how to interact, how to make an actual choice of whether or not you're going to eat a cookie or a piece of cake or a piece of pie or whatever it may be, or you're very restrictive and you have compulsive behaviors around it. None of that's healthy. And isn't the goal to live a healthy life? To treat your body with respect? To treat it as this vessel in all capacities for goodness? Well, if that's the goal, then we're definitely not going to label sugar as evil, and we're definitely not going to label sexuality as evil either, because it just is. It just exists. And when we start to understand more context, and we start to really think about, okay, what is the goodness that this can bring into my life? What pleasure can this bring? What restrictions should I have around it for my own personal benefit? Because it's not just one way or the other. It's not just eat an entire cake every time you're presented cake, or you're not allowed to have cake. You feel me? Okay. So, the question being about masturbation, is it a sin? Okay, let's first talk about scripture. Is masturbation mentioned in scripture? No. But some interpretations have kind of taken it their own way. According to LDS doctrine and LDS teaching, no. Masturbation is not in scripture. If you ever hear that it is in scripture, let me tell you where that comes from. There's 2 primary scripture passages that are interpreted as referring to masturbation. First one's going to be Genesis 38, and this one's going to be the most significant one. This is the story of Onan. Now, Onan was the second son of Judah, one of Jacob's 12 sons, and Judah's oldest son, E-R, was married to a woman named Tamar. Okay, so you have a couple. But died before he was able to have children with Tamar. According to the custom at that time, known as the Levirate, you get me. The marriage law at the time, when a man died without having children, his brother was expected to marry the widow and produce the offspring on his brother's behalf so that the deceased family and the inheritance would continue in that family. So Judah, the father, told Onan, the brother, to fulfill his brotherly duty and this Levite marriage duty. So he said, we have verse 8, "Go in to your brother's wife and perform your duty as brother-in-law to her. Raise up offspring for your brother." However, Onan refused to give Tamar a child that would be considered his brother's heir. So it then has verse 9, "Whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his seed on the ground to keep from preventing offspring for his brother." So this act of deliberately interrupting intercourse to avoid conception angered God, and the passage says that God put Onan to death for what he did. Now, of course, different religions interpret this scripture differently. Lots of different ways. The LDS perspective believes that this scripture is really talking about Onan's disobedience and selfishness. He wanted the sexual relationship with Tamar, but not the responsibility or the loss of inheritance that would come from giving her a son in his brother's name. So his sin in this case was, we believe in LDS theology, was refusing his family duty and using Tamar for his own pleasure without honoring the covenants and cultural obligations that they had at that time. The focus for this should be on betrayal, greed, and disobedience, not the sexual act itself. Okay? But a lot of other Christian denominations especially, they tell this story and they use it to show the consequences of masturbation, which is the, quote, spilling of the seed without the means of procreation. This is also one of the stories that has led many Christians to believe that sex should always be for the purpose of procreation, which is why some do not allow for any sort of contraception to be used, because they believe that sex should always be for the use of procreation. That otherwise, God is upset and you're not doing things properly, and in this case, Onan paid the great price. And so that story is used to demonstrate the importance of sex being used for procreation and the sin, in this case, how they tend to teach it, of masturbation, of spilling your seed, of ejaculating without it being inside a vagina for the purpose of making a child. All right, so keep that in mind. That is the main scripture and the main story that is typically used throughout a lot of Christian denominations, but not the LDS. So just know that we do not use that. The other scripture that is sometimes interpreted is going to be Matthew 5, verses 27 through 30. In this passage, Jesus, he speaks against lustful thoughts, and he uses metaphors to illustrate the seriousness of desire. And some interpret this as a condemnation of masturbation because it can be accompanied by lust. So they kind of make that connection themselves. But others argue that the context is about the heart and avoiding lustful intent in general and was not specifically about masturbation. And that is the teaching that the LDS people, that we, the church, teaches. So this is part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and where he talks about you should not commit adultery, and that anyone who looks upon a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. And that if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than the whole body to be thrown down to hell. Bold stuff. So a lot of Catholic interpreters, especially, they drew that line between lustful thoughts and physical acts of pleasure, and thus masturbation was deemed as sinful. And then you also, here's another little piece, there were two influential Catholic figures at the time, Augustine of Hippo and Thomas Aquinas. Again, sorry with my pronunciation. These are some tricky names. So those two in particular really influenced the teaching, and they spread their views that sexual pleasure was meant to be only within the context of procreation. So once again, that narrative being taught. And masturbation, both outside of marriage and without the purpose of reproduction, was deemed as morally wrong. And that was the narrative for a very long time. And then you will see in my presentation on masturbation, the document that was produced, the heinous sin of self-pollution that fundamentally changed the world. Guys, this document is insane. And basically it came out in the 1700s and blamed every single sickness, acne, pale face, anything possible wrong with you, it blamed masturbation. And then that's when we get like the chastity belts, and that's when we get the shame and blah 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 blah. And there's a whole history lesson on it, and it's incredible because this was all happening for centuries. This was going on in this narrative, and the fear being built around touching yourself. So this is important when it comes to the actual question of, is this a sin? Well, let me also answer that with one more contextual piece on the LDS church side. So when it comes to the church handbook, they used to have multiple handbooks, like a different one for bishops and things. Now it is just one. It's the general handbook. So if anyone tells you different, they're lying. They are incorrect. Because I was telling someone who has left the church, I was like, oh yeah, well in the church handbook. And they're like, oh, well, but in the other ones. And I was like, actually, they did away with that quite a while ago. But in the church handbook, let me look it up again. It is, I believe it's section 32 based on memory. Let's see if I'm right. Oh, guys, sometimes I'm too good. It's like I know what I'm talking about. Section 32.6.4.1 is the only place in the entire handbook in which it talks about masturbation. And let me tell you where it says this. It says it under when a membership council is not normally necessary is the section, and it says a membership council is not held for the actions listed below, except for the last item, which I'll say that in a second. So it has inactivity in the church, not fulfilling church duties, not paying tithing, sins of omission, masturbation, not complying with the word of wisdom, using pornography, so that is listed under a membership council is not held for these actions, using pornography, but then the last one has a caveat, and it says except for child pornography, and then it has another section specifically on child pornography, or intensive or compulsive use of pornography that has caused significant harm to a member's marriage or family. And they have another section on that as well. And we will have many more podcast episodes about pornography and my thoughts on that, because that's another one. Masturbation is probably number one topic that I get, and then pornography is gonna be like a close second, but they're like interrelated. They're usually associated with each other, which is also why I think it's like doubly heightened as anxiety producing activity, because oftentimes people don't associate masturbation without the use of pornography, when those are two different things. The rule or standard typically when you're talking about those two things is you're not watching pornography without the inclusion of masturbation, but you absolutely can masturbate without the inclusion of pornography. You don't necessarily have to have any sort of visual stimuli or even auditory stimuli for masturbation, okay? But we've oftentimes only associated those two, that like you absolutely, if you're masturbating, you're 100% watching pornography, and then we have heightened anxiety around pornography itself. So those two things we need to separate in order to see them clearly. When we're talking about masturbation, the physical act of self-soothing, of self-pleasuring, of touching your genitals, of touching your body in a more sensual way, when we're talking about adults, then that does not automatically mean that you're doing it in conjunction with pornography, okay? You can do that by itself. You can do it as a means to calm yourself down, as a means to feel pleasure, to get to know your body, as a means to fill the void of being bored. Like, there's a lot of different reasons that people use this behavior to either excite themselves or to calm themselves down. There's a lot of different contexts in which masturbation is used, but oftentimes we don't teach it like that. We just teach it as it's only ever being used in this one context, and we don't agree with this context. And we also have a separation when we talk about masturbation between men and women. It's taught very differently because in general, just biologically, men do have a much easier time of accessing their genitals because they're on the outside of their body, whereas women, it's more on the inside. And then we also have a lot more historical narratives that have gone on for centuries about women and our genitals either being so sacred and hidden that, like, you know, they're this beautiful thing that we don't touch, or they're disgusting and they're terrible, and, you know, it kind of goes both ways. But in both scenarios, women are just not seen as touching themselves or interacting with their genitals in the same way that men are, because literally to use the bathroom, to pee, they are touching their genitals. Now, we don't immediately think that every time a man is going to urinate that he's masturbating. We've made that distinction that that's okay to touch your genitals in that context, but in any other context it's not okay. So we love to put these like labels of when it's okay and when it's not okay, and then for women it's just always not okay because we're less familiar with that, and there is shame that is put on both men and women. But again, in my lesson on masturbation, we're going to talk about like what research shows about the average age in which children tend to discover this part of themselves that, wow, this feels good when I like rub my genitals in this way, or when I touch them in this way, or like what is developmentally normal, how to react with that, and also how to think about this. All right, getting back to, once again, the question. So, can Mormons masturbate? Can we use sex toys? Can we do these things as unmarried individuals? And then even as married individuals, because I get it from both sides, but a lot of these questions had to do with single adults. Here's what I'm going to say. All right? Because I'm not going to say yes or no to you, because really you need to come to a place where you can feel okay either way, that you're either, if you're only not doing it out of resentment and out of this oppression and like restriction, and like that's not healthy. That's not a healthy mindset. That's not a healthy reason to not do something. But then if you're only doing it because this is the only way in which you can get pleasure at all, this is your self-soothing technique when you feel that you aren't communicating well with others, when you're not connecting with other people, if you are, shutting yourself in your room to like masturbate very frequently, this isn't something that is going to draw you closer to other people. So keep that in mind as an activity. But there is nothing that's developmentally wrong with it. And I really like Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, which she talks about masturbation. She discusses the problematic thought that if we keep it in a framework that your body is only good if it's comforting someone else, that is a really rough way to think about your body that is going to set you up for not a very healthy relationship, and in a lot of ways that can really set you up to be a victim of sexual violence of some kind. So we are owners of our body. These are ours. And your genitals are not something to be scared of, something to be ashamed of. The pleasure that they can bring is something that you were made with. Like, that is something you were born with. That is not wrong. This is a natural function of your body. And when we add shame to this natural functioning, these natural feelings, a very normal developmental behavior, when we immediately put this like guilt and shame on it, that can really set us onto a path that is not healthy and not a healthy mindset. Like, it does not help us to not think about sex or not think of ourselves as sexual, because we are. That's a fact. That's truth. That is doctrine. We are sexual beings. That is not wrong or contrary to God, because God was the one that made us this way. So when we can understand that, and when we can understand the context of what this behavior is, how it's been taught, then we can start to really think, how am I going to use this wisely? What am I going to use this to get me to? Like, am I going to use this as a means to motivate me towards greater connection with other people? Or am I going to use it as a way to just self-gratify and take me further away from healthy, intimate relationships and connection? That's really the framework we need to be thinking about this. And also, there needs to be more room here when we can actually breathe and calm down and not have this heightened anxiety around this topic. We need to be able to understand that there are different contexts in which someone might masturbate. Someone might masturbate as a means to prevent them from breaking the law of chastity. If they're in a relationship and they are really working towards the goal of marriage in the temple to stay abstinent, and they have these sexual desires and these sexual feelings, and they may do this as something on their own to help dispel that energy. Other people may use this to help channel it into other activities that have nothing to do with masturbation. Other people, like after divorce, after they have been completely sexually active, going from that to not sexually active, again, as this behavior to help them to keep the law of chastity. You also have a way of self-discovery. A lot of women that I work with who have severe sexual dysfunction, they have a lot of unintentional tightening of their lower pelvic floor muscles. It causes them a lot of pain during penetration. And one of the number one treatments for that is going to be masturbation. That is just a fact. You know, there's also using dilators, pelvic floor therapy. There's a lot to it, but getting your nervous system to calm down enough for yourself, to be able to interact and touch yourself and not be nervous around that. I mean, this is your body. So it can be terrifying if you can't even do it yourself. It can be just impossible to allow someone else to then interact with your body in that way. And I see this quite often. And I see it with married couples as well who are dealing with G-triple PD, or previously known as vaginismus. So again, this unintentional tightening, this pain during penetration. And when we talk through the different options, and one of them being masturbation, either masturbating together, either masturbating on their own, either there's a lot of things that in which this activity, this behavior can be really helpful to them to discover like what feels pleasurable, to help them to relax their nervous system so that they can grow in greater connection with their partner. And other times, you know, you have people that this just feels good. This is just an activity that they enjoy. And I'm not here to label good or bad. And a lot of times when I start this conversation, and I am playing very neutral ground, because the more that I've learned about it, the more I've seen, oh wow, okay, we've really, we've taught this incorrectly for a very long time about it being this horrible, terrible sin and awful. Okay, well, that's not true. And it's also not, like, prohibited within church policy and, like, in the church handbook. And very culturally, it is, looked down upon for sure. But then we add all this shame to it, and that when we take that away, when we can strip that back and say, okay, we're not dealing with that right now. We're just dealing with, what is this? And developmentally, how does this work with, like, human beings? We're going to take the sexuality component out as well. Just, what is this? And how does this serve us? And then how does it not serve us as people? That's when we can really see it. Now, I wrote this little analogy about it, because one thing that I've noticed when I say something that challenges this narrative that people are used to hearing about sexuality, they often assume that I'm arguing for the opposite extreme. So if I say something like, we are so afraid of feeling eroticism and feeling turned on and anything like that, or that our bodies shouldn't be just used in the context of comforting someone else, then some people, they immediately hear me say, so you're saying that we should just simply comfort ourselves? Like, that's it. Like, that's all the time. Like, it's completely fine. Or if I say sexuality is not inherently a threat to our spiritual nature, some people hear that nothing matters, and I'm just saying that, like, everything goes. Like, anything and everything, you go, you do. But those are not the only options. That is not what I'm saying. We have this tendency, I think especially as LDS members, to think in extremes. If we're not advocating for repression, then we must be promoting this, like, indulgence. And if we're not saying never, then we must be saying always. That's ridiculous. That's not at all what I'm saying. That's not how sexuality works. That's not how almost anything works. So I've come up with a little analogy. I think that the best way to describe this is like driving a car down the highway. Your sexuality is incredibly powerful. Like a car traveling 70 to 80 miles per hour, it can take you somewhere beautiful, connect you with people that you love, and become one of the greatest gifts of your life. Trust me, being someone who has lived in places without a car, I know just how useful and powerful a car is, and how much better it makes your life when you live in a place where they do not have, like, alternative ways, like bus systems and things. You need a car to get around. I have been in that situation, just trapped and unable to go anywhere. And so this is why I kind of chose this one, because also when you're a teenager and when you're learning to drive, this can be terrifying. Getting on the freeway can be one of the scariest things ever when you're a teenager, because all of a sudden you're going to a speed that you've never gone before. You've been, like, sitting at 25, 35 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you have to go way faster than you're used to, and everyone else is going that fast, and you have to really pay attention, and any slight move, you feel like you could just, like, crash your car and die. It's very scary. It is an intimidating thing. But now, for me, as almost a 30-year-old woman, when I get in the car, I'm not instantly anxious. I'm not going, like, oh, I don't want to get on the freeway. And maybe some people are. Like, some people never get past that. They're not able to, they stay in this fear because they don't practice. They don't get familiar with it. They aren't able to get coping mechanisms and support. And so it is a scary experience every single time they get in the car, even if they've been in the car for 15 years. And sometimes people still feel that way about their sexuality, that they have never gotten past this fear that they had when they first started developing, when it hits puberty, these sexual feelings and the sexual part of themselves. So that is not healthy. You need to get to a place, especially if this is years in, where, like I can, and when I get in the car, where I can do so with ease. And I can use this as something that propels me towards good. I can use my car to take me to places and to meet with people and to do what I need to do. And it gives me so much. It creates a lot of freedom in my life to have the privilege of having a car. And our sexuality, I view the same way. This is this privilege that drives us to greater connection with people, with our creative part of ourselves, because that's what it is. It is this power of creation that we have to create beauty, create art, create connection, create intimacy, deep friendship. And then you also, of course, have the physical side of it as well. But it is more than just one thing. In the same way that you use your car to go more than just one destination or one place, you use it for a lot of different things. So the goal of driving, continuing on with my little analogy here, let me back up. So your sexuality, it's incredibly powerful, like this car driving 70 miles an hour, and it can take you all these places. But that same power can be used to cause incredible damage if not used correctly. Like if it is handled carelessly, then absolutely this can be a very dangerous thing. But the goal of driving is not to hug the shoulder or to ride the center line. It is to stay centered in your lane. Imagine one edge of the lane represents excessive restriction. So this is going to be fear, shame, and disconnection from your sexuality. The other edge represents losing your intentionality, so allowing your impulse to be the driver instead of wisdom. Now, neither of these edges of your lane, like it's not good to be like hugging one way or the other. You want to be centered. You need to be centered. A healthy sexuality is not found by bouncing like back and forth between these lines, between these extremes. It's found by being comfortable in this lane, by looking ahead, and by being able to relax and ease into this. Now, anyone who drives knows that you do not spend your entire time driving, especially if you're going on a road trip. Like, you are not perfectly motionless in the center. Sometimes you need to merge. Sometimes you need to pass another car. Sometimes you need to drive in the carpool lane. Sometimes you slow down. Sometimes you speed up. You need to match traffic. Good drivers are consistently making thoughtful adjustments while they drive. They are staying present, they are staying aware, they are intaking all of the information of what's going on around them, and then they are able to make decisions while they drive, and every adjustment that they make has a purpose to it. You're not just like weaving across the lanes because you feel like it. You don't just like drift to the shoulder of the freeway because you're afraid of driving. Like that's not good. You instead make like these intentional choices that is going to move you towards your end goal, your destination, while you're staying aware of everything that's going on. And truly, I believe that our sexuality works the same way. That there are some seasons where we need to have greater restraint. We need to be able to slow down a little bit, maybe get over to the right so we can let other people like pass by. There are seasons where we have like better openness and playfulness, intimacy, vulnerability, and we need to be able to fluctuate and we need to be able to move and go a little bit faster and get in the carpool lane and date someone. Like we need to be able to increase, and in the carpool lane, you have to be able to go faster in that lane, like for the safety of everyone there. If we're talking the road, right? Like there are certain rules when you're there, and those do not apply when you're on the far right of traffic. So this is with the road, we understand that like there are ways to drive, and nothing, and I mean nothing, is scarier than being in a car with a scared driver. Nothing is more dangerous than a scared and timid driver. If you have ever been in a car with a teenager who's getting on the freeway for the first time, terrifying. I've been in cars with adults who are like either learning to drive or they're just not comfortable driving, because I've lived all over the world, so not everyone, starts driving at 14, 15, 16 years old. Like, some people don't start driving until they're like 25, 26, okay? And they can be sometimes very scared drivers, very quick with the brakes and quick with the gas, and they're fluctuating back and forth, and they're just so tense and so nervous, and it's quite frightening to be in a car with them because they're making like these quick movements, and that's not how it should be, and that actually puts you in more danger when you can't make a decision and when you're second guessing yourself every step of the way. That is a very unsafe driver. And you will make mistakes if you are driving like that, and you will get in an accident. You absolutely will. If you're constantly second guessing yourself, or like you put on your blinker and then you're like waiting forever and then you wait too long, and then that's not safe. Instead, you need to be able to sit as the driver and make a decision. You need to do it thoughtfully. You need to be able to say, okay, and I'm switching lanes now. I'm going to check. I'm going to make sure it's safe. I'm going to make sure it's good to go. But yep, this lane is going to keep me going towards where I need to go. This is going to get me there. And all driving you towards a purpose, a destination. And making sure that your time in the car, you have your radio going and you have maybe friends in the car. Like, there are things to make that experience more pleasurable and enjoyable. And I believe that that's the same. Like, when you, as a single person especially, find things that not only drive you towards greater creativity, maybe your destination, hopefully, is like to actually find a partner, but also inviting other people in on that, in the sense that, like, developing intimate relationships emotionally with people around you, having fun, finding the joy in life, finding pleasure in life. All of that is important, and helping your nervous system to calm down and to not immediately just jump to fear every time that you like are having an interaction with someone from the opposite sex. Like, you need to not be so scared about your sexuality or about others. You need to be confident in it, and to therefore make better decisions and actually be a steward of this power. So all of this to say, like, in this analogy, your destination is what matters. Your awareness of everything going on around you, that matters too. The most important thing is going to be that you're the one driving. You are in charge of figuring this out, of being in control of your own sexuality and deciding when you are going to experience pleasure, when you're going to refrain or restrict in a way for the greater good. All of this is important, and fear does not produce healthy sexuality. It produces this like rigid control and like reckless overcorrection in the same way that it does for driving. So confidence, awareness, intentionality, that is what's going to keep you centered. And when it comes to masturbation, I recommend that you seek out answers. Go and listen. I have a lot of different resources of people that I recommend listening to. Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, she's coming on my podcast next month. She is a great resource. Tammy Hill's another one, the Christian Sex Educator. I have quite a few others as well that are listed. I think next week I'm going to have just like a resource page that's going to be available on my link tree. Let me write that down, that I'm going to do that. So places for you to kind of like begin and help get you more centered, help you to be more self-authoring, and help you to actually decide, like, where is the destination that you want to go? Like, how are you wanting to use this? Are you wanting to use masturbation as a way to ease your stress and shame around this topic that you're like, I actually think that this needs to happen. I think I do need to be okay with touching my own genitals, because how am I ever going to allow someone else in on this if I can't even do it myself? Or if maybe you're someone that's like, you know what, at this time in my life, I think having a little bit more restraint is going to be a little bit better for me, and doing it thoughtfully, being prayerful about it. This is not an untouchable, scary topic to our heavenly parents. Okay, this is absolutely something that you can discuss, and I frankly think you should be discussing. Whether married or single, this can be something that can add a lot of pleasure into your life, but it can also, if used not incorrectly, but if used in a way to just self-soothe or to avoid connection with other people or to just indulge yourself, I think it can also be a detriment to you as well. In the same way as sugar. In the same way that I think, yeah, if every time you go to eat a piece of cake, you actually eat the whole cake, then yeah, I don't think that that's really going to lead you to a healthy lifestyle. But like you need to find something that feels good for you, like what your lifestyle is going to be, what it's going to include and what it's not. And I'm not here to tell you one way or the other, but I am here to tell you that contextually we have had a narrative of masturbation being sinful and wrong for a very long time, but doctrinally that is not correct. It is not taught in the handbook. It is actually not even taught biblically, and in a lot of other religions. And again, in my presentation, you'll see I actually did not only through Christianity, but then I wanted to look at like the Jewish and Muslim interpretations, Buddhist, how they look at masturbation and self-pleasure. And I even have a quote, hold on, let me find it, from Elder Parley P. Pratt, back in the day. This quote says, "Some persons have supposed that our natural affections were the result of a fallen and corrupt nature, and that they are carnal, sensual, and devilish, and that therefore ought to be resisted, subdued, and overcome as so many evils which prevent our perfection or progress in the spiritual life. Such persons have mistaken the source and foundation of happiness altogether." There are lots of other quotes and things from past church leaders, from current church leaders, that can hopefully help lower the stress around this topic in particular and get us to a place where we can feel more comfortable, in the same way that with driving, like you need to get to a place where you're comfortable and therefore you can actually make decisions and you can actually get towards your destination and have an enjoyable time while you do. It's not about suppressing pleasure just in all capacities, but it's about finding it in a lot of different ways. I find pleasure in dancing and in movement and in hosting parties and in watching certain TV shows and like in a lot of different ways. As well as, for me, I find so much pleasure in understanding how we got here as a society, as an LDS culture, around how we feel about sexual topics. That just lights up my soul, and I have so much desire to learn more and to understand it and then to explain it to you. So in short, the other thing I was going to say when you ask about vibrators in particular, a lot of times people think that they are going to cause like nerve damage or that they're somehow like unhealthy for us. And scientifically, that's not the case. That's not true. It's not going to cause nerve damage. And it depends on the type of vibration. This is where I get like really nerdy, because there is different types of vibration, but then there's also more than vibration, because you have like the higher frequency, which is going to be more buzzy, and sometimes that can feel numbing, especially if you're using it directly on your clitoris. So for some, that can like feel almost numbing or itchy in a way. But there's techniques. There's also a more of a deeper frequency, more of a rumble vibration that can feel a little bit more pleasurable and less numbing to like touch. But again, there's also like there's air pulse, air going back and forth quickly. There's suction, there's tapping, there's rubbing, there's all sorts of different settings that these things can do. It's not just vibration. And that goes for the men's as well. For men in particular, when it comes to masturbation, I've also heard a lot, in a lot of my research, that there's been this idea that if you masturbate like really frequently, that you're not going to be able to get an erection, or that it will somehow damage your penis. Now, in short, that's not true, but there is a but there. The aggression and pressure in which you use can affect the the spongiosum on the inside, and there is a little bit of truth to that, not nearly as much as it's been heightened, of like, if you masturbate, you're gonna break your penis. Like, no. That's not true. And especially if you have good cardiovascular health, that's going to be one of the number one things that's going to keep your penis functioning very well. If you're having your regular nightly erections, men have 4 to 6 a night, which a lot of times they don't even know. So it's usually every 90 minutes during REM sleep, a nocturnal erection to help keep everything nice and healthy in there. And I can go more into depth about that, but no, in short, no, but yes, if you're doing it excessively. Like, if you're masturbating, quite a few times a day, and it's quite aggressive, it's quite quick, then yes, you can affect the functioning of your penis, because it's not designed, if you don't also have good cardiovascular health, to be like filling that much, and then the muscles around your pelvic floor that are causing the ejaculation, if you're not very fit, and those muscles, you can tire those out, but it's not gonna be a huge detriment to your health. It can affect it, sure, but not to the extremes that these like blanket statements of like, if you do this, it's gonna ruin it. Like, that's not quite true. It's not quite true. Not quite right. It also depends on how long you're doing it. If you're doing these sessions, I just recently read a whole like article and research paper about, it's called gooning, if you've ever heard of it, but basically the long and short of it all is, it's men, well, typically these teenage boys, where they'll be masturbating for like 8 hours straight. Now that's very unhealthy, but not just from like a pedile standpoint, from like blood flow, but again, we're looking at the activity as a whole, as a behavior. To be locked up in your room for 8 hours, not connecting with someone that's real, and to only be associating this physical pleasure with artificial things, because in these cases, these men and boys are typically doing it in conjunction with pornography. Again, you can do it without, and if you are going to masturbate, I do highly recommend separating those and doing it as an activity that when you're thinking about it, and when you are having that behavior, that it is something that you're thinking about the connection that you can have with other people and that you desire to have with other people, so that it is something that is drawing you towards that rather than away from it, and it's not creating this unhealthy connection of physical satisfaction without another person. Because if there is a danger, it's going to be there, or if there's a problem, it's going to be lying in that. But yeah, 8 hours straight, yeah, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be unhealthy. That's going to be compulsive. That's not going to be good for your mental health, to be thinking about that for that long. Like, no. That, I think we can all agree, is not healthy. But doing it, I don't want to give you like a once a day or something a week, because then people take that way too far and they're like, well, this is what Nikki said was normal. No, I'm telling you, you need to figure out for you, what is this driving you towards? Are you going somewhere with this? And if you are, and if it's somewhere good, then you need to figure out if you're going to continue, and if you're going to feel good about that, or if maybe you need to choose different activities or ways to channel the sexual energy, which I'll have other episodes about. But to answer your questions about, can you masturbate? Can you? Sure. Yeah, totally possible. Stick your hand down there. I'm like a teacher where it's like, can I go to the bathroom? I don't know, can you? May I? Well, that's up to you. That is up to you and God. I am not here to make that decision for you. I'm just here to tell you it is developmentally normal. It's not going to cause you any damage. It's not going to cause you any health problems. Vibrators are not going to cause you any health problems either. In fact, in some cases, it can actually, well, in a lot of cases, not only can it increase pleasure, but in some cases, it can actually really help the muscles and things to relax. So especially for women who are dealing with an unintentional tightening, the G-triple-PD, vaginismus, there are certain vibrators that are actually designed to help. They're dilators, but they do have a low vibration setting to help with the muscle strain, to help those muscles relax, make it less painful, because that's really the goal of the dilators and things in that case, is going to be to lessen that pain. We really want to make sure that it's not painful and that it's pleasurable, because this is a pleasurable activity, having sex. We want it to be, and it should be. So if it's not, then you can come talk to me. We can go through techniques and all sorts of stuff. But hopefully this gave you enough information to think about those questions, because that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about these things, and I want you to ponder on them and pray about them and figure out for yourself what is going to be a part of your life, what's not, at what points in your life. Maybe it's like driving. Like other times you fluctuate, you go from lane to lane, and in a grander, what am I trying to say? In an attempt to get to your destination, which is your ultimate goal, which for us is going to be healthy, intimate relationships. That's our goal. With anything with sexuality, that should be the driving force of your decision making. Is this helping me get in greater alignment with developing healthy, intimate relationships, not only physically with a partner, like in a sexual way, but also with friendships, with our family relationships? Are we able to have healthy, intimate relationships? Intimacy meaning deep friendship with other people and with ourselves. Can we be at peace with ourselves and feel good about ourselves and confident in ourselves to be able to interact with other people and connect with them? And if the answer is no, if there's a lot of anxiety and fear and shame around this, then I recommend that you go and talk to someone about this. And I work with a lot of sex therapists here in Utah County that they focus on sexual shame and on compulsive behaviors, on abnormal sexual behaviors as well, because sometimes the activities or things that you do engage in, they're not always healthy, not only for you mentally or physically, but they can be unhealthy for future connection as well. And those are behaviors that you might need to look at changing. So all of that to say, I hope this helps. Hope this helped. I feel like some people can be like, that didn't answer my question at all. Well, sorry. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to get the info. And you need to decide for yourself. As far as like using vibrators to masturbate with, I mean, again, you absolutely can. As far as like, is that something that you can do? Can you go out and buy a vibrator? For sure. Go buy a vibrator. Like, you absolutely can. If you're wondering, like, for a lot of women especially, it can be really helpful to help promote blood flow to the area, to get the right amount of stimulation in order to fully feel pleasure. And for some women, it can also be helpful because it can be quite scary or intimidating to touch themselves. So sometimes having like something that you're doing it with can also like help them get past that. I find that often with my clients that suffer with sexual dysfunction, is even getting through like the touch barrier is difficult. And so sometimes a vibrator can not only help with pain, but it can can help reducing it, but it can help them in familiarizing themselves with being comfortable touching themselves. And especially like using it in a bath or, a warmer setting or something like that. Make sure that you're using the proper lube, and there's other elements at play there if you are going to choose to use a vibrator, but that is all explained in my vibrator videos. So you can go check those out if you want, but there's nothing against it as far as like church policy goes. It's just going to be determined by you, and there's a lot of different types, a lot of different purposes that they serve. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products available, and a big part of what I do is try and help people understand like what is available, how they market versus how they actually work. So if you are at all interested in that, married, single, whoever you may be, I also have information on vibrators and different products as well. So you can go and check out my Patreon for all of that. So, all right, have a great week, and I'm very excited to answer more of your questions in the coming weeks. Make sure to submit more, tell your friends, and follow me on social media. And you can also, of course, use my Linktree to have me come and speak to your ward. Anything that I do with the church is free, so if I come and speak to your ward or your relief society, that is going to be a free service. Talking about female sexual health, chastity, embracing your sexuality as a single person, relationships. I do it all. I whatever topic you want. I have a list of my topics that and my PowerPoints and stuff, because a lot of times with church things, a lot of times bishops or stake presidents would like approval first, like they need to approve it, and so they would like to know what I'm going to teach, and so I have all of those ready to go. I send them your way based on what the ward's needs are, and then I can come. And then if you want me to come and do a little bit more detailed about like techniques or about vibrators, I don't know, anything else that's a little bit more detailed, then you can also sign up for those as well, for ladies' nights or toy parties, or personal sessions, of course, where I can work with you or you and your spouse together, or partner, or whatever, whoever it is, boyfriend, girlfriend, that we can work together to get you to a place where, one, you're not having any sort of sexual dysfunction, because that's always my primary thing, is to work with people with sexual dysfunction, and then to make sure that everything is pleasurable, that you're having a good time, that you know what you're doing. And I can help with all of that in a way that aligns with your values, and you never have to worry that there's going to be any like content that's, I don't know, risque, because I make sure that everything that I show is scientific, but also will make someone comfortable, that you can actually learn and not be distracted by something that feels uncomfortable to you, because we're just here to learn and make this less taboo together. All right, and with that, have a great week!